Tonight, an important issue, Northern Ireland. The political prisoners on the H Block, their hunger strike late last year, and it seems that it has started again. I'll introduce my illustrious panel following some commercials, and we'll also do our People, Places, and Things gossip column of the air, which I call Have You Heard? And now we will have our message.
If you're 60 or older, you may want to take advantage of a free tax counseling service at a tax aid center near your home. Through April 15th, volunteer counselors will be on hand at centers in the 5 boroughs to help you save money on your income tax. To find out where and when, call 212-758-1707. That's 758-1707.
If you or someone you love is over age 50, I urge you to get paper and pencil ready to respond to this announcement. Now, even though you are over 50, you can buy life insurance with no physical examination and no medical questions. If you are a male between 50 and 72, or a female between 50 and 75, you cannot be turned down for this plan. Premiums are just $6.95 a month, and your premium will never increase. This is Prime Life 50 Plus by Intra-America Life Insurance Company. Through its modified death benefit, Prime Life 50 Plus leads to the benefits of permanent life insurance regardless of your health. If you are age 50 or over, call now for free information in the mail.
For free information, write Insurance, WMCA, New York, zip 119, or call 212-397-9000. Have you heard? At the Explorers Club dinner tomorrow night at the Waldorf Astoria, 1,500 guests will dine on appetizers donated by the New York Aquarium. They'll begin with shark mousse and Chinese jellyfish, prepared by Paula Marie Michaud. Shark mousse, I asked? Well, I learned that shark meat is a common substitute for swordfish steak. And on menus, it's often referred to as sea scallops. Now, swordfish is $6 a pound, while shark meat is only $2 a pound, and just as nutritious. Paula Marie Michaud has a dozen shark recipes, and she teaches these recipes and how to do it in her Piscine Cuisine course at the Aquarium in Coney Island. If you wonder why so many people are hanging around Park Avenue at 106th Street, that's East Harlem, with cameras and autograph books, it's because Michael Caine and Christopher Reeve and Diane Cannon are filming Death Trap in the old Pathé Studios under the direction of Sidney Lumet. Who is West Germany's most famous businesswoman? Her name is Beate Uhse. She's a self-made tycoon, 61 years old, and she sells 3,500 varieties of love aids. Now, what are love aids? How about inflatable mates, for starters? Now, Mrs. Hughes is distributing in America a portfolio of hardcore movies to 46 theaters under her United States company title, Real Pleasure Unlimited. That's REEL. Wait till Jerry Falwell hears about this one. During World War II, she piloted Luftwaffe planes from factories to the front German lines. Then after the war, as a widow with a baby to support, she picked potatoes. And during that time, she wrote a 4-page birth control pamphlet, which began her financial rise. Today, her business nets, just in Germany, $57.5 million. She has become to German pornography what Colonel Sanders was to fried chicken. An international music festival is being planned in Moscow for the second week in May. The program will include mostly classical music and will feature composers and artists from 20 countries. According to the Soviets, The purpose of the festival is to promote democracy and humanism. Have they forgotten Anatoly Sharansky and the other dissidents? People are short of ready cash, right? Not some. At a Park Avenue dinner party this past Wednesday night for 30 couples, black tie and all that, the ladies were favored with an ounce of pheromone. That's spelled Pheromone. Now, that's an hormonal perfume, and perhaps the most costly in the world. It sells for $225 per ounce at Saks Fifth. The men received telescoping walking sticks, which retail for upwards of $150 at Gucci. Now, here's the funny part, at least to me. One of the guests sold her ounce of pheromone perfume to her maid for the cut-rate price of $150. And lastly, it's a sure bet that finding a cab next Tuesday, April the 14th, from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. will be next to impossible. Now, here's why. The driver of every taxi in New York City that pulls up to the brand-new Hotel Parker Meridian on West 56th Street during those hours, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., will receive a French picnic. That's a free box luncheon. And chances to win weekends at this luxurious, brand-new $75 million hotel. The president of the Taxi Drivers Union, Ben Goldberg, said it's the first time a New York cabbie has been offered more than a cup of coffee. And Jay Turnoff, Jay, if you're listening, forgive me, chairman of the New York City Taxi and Limousine Service Commission, thinks it's a great idea on the part of the Parker Meridian Hotel. Now, what is a French picnic? Each box lunch will have a half-roast chicken, a French roll and butter, a wedge of camembert cheese, a piece of fresh fruit, and a bottle of imported water. And how about that? Well, it's Friday, so what? To be continued. I'm Candy Jones, and this is WMCA, Strauss Communications in New York City. Tonight we do have a serious program, and in the studio with us we have Paul O'Dwyer, who is in private practice in New York City with the law firm O'Dwyer and Bernstein, and you remember him, of course, as the city council president. And Kathleen Gallagher, who is currently in New York as the representative of the National H Block and ARMA Committee. She's the first representative who's been sent to our shores by the committee, and she's the founder and secretary of the Dairy Committee for Prisoners' Welfare. Also with us, Richard Harvey, professor of international human rights and comparative law at the Center for Legal Education and Urban Policy at CCNY. Mr. Harvey is a British barrister in civil and criminal law, and he's defended a number of Irish political prisoners in Britain. And Reverend Paul Abels, who's been with us before, and he's pastor of the Washington Square Methodist Church, and he accompanied the Berrigan brothers on their trip to Northern Ireland last fall. And Reverend Abels works with the New York H Block ARMA Committee. And Father Don Kenna, you see, we do have a large panel, who is a Brooklyn Catholic priest and a member of the delegation also, who had visited Northern Ireland with the Berrigans. And he serves the New York ARMA Committee, is that correct? As a speaker at forums. I have a feeling that we are going to pause for a commercial message, and we'll start our discussion right after this.
Hi, Hi, this is Bruce Williams, and I have a rather formidable task. You know, I've been a salesman all my life. Yeah, I've been a peddler. I have just a few seconds to sell me to you. Here's what you do. Why not sample me? Every day between 2 and 4, you and I have a standing date. We kick around the problems of life, and once in a great while, we find a solution. Test it out every day from 2 to 4 right here on WMCA, the very best in conversation radio.
Here we go again. It's Candy Jones. Mrs. Gallagher, I know that you're going to be in this country for a limited amount of time. I wish you'd go back to the hunger strike, and I know that a lot of our regular listeners are familiar with it, but this was the hunger strike that had ended in December on the 53rd day. Would you sort of update us about that strike, why it was ended, and why is there a new hunger strike going on in Longkesh, the concentration camp in Northern Ireland, and Armagh?
The reason for the ending of the previous hunger strike on the 18th of December 1980, after 7 men had embarked on that particular hunger strike. The reason for ending the hunger strike was, at that particular moment in time, Sean McKenna, who was one of the 7 hunger strikers, had been given by the prison doctor literally only hours to live.
Was he the young man who was about to lose his eyesight?
He had already lost his eyesight. He was in a very, very critical condition. He was isolated from the other 6 hunger strikers. Late on the evening of the 18th of December, the 6 hunger strikers were approached by a Northern Ireland official. None of us have ever heard the name of the Northern Ireland official. But it is fact that the Northern Ireland official, accompanied by one other person who we have since and have never really found out whether that other person was a cleric or a member of the prison staff. They produced, the officials that is, a 34-page document compiled by the Northern Ireland office and approved by the British government. The contents of that 34-page document were read out by the Northern Ireland official to the 6 men who were on hunger strike. And when one remembers and thinks of the very, very traumatic situation that those 6 hunger strikers were presented with, here they were on the 53rd day of their hunger strike, being made aware of the physical condition of their comrade, Sean McKenna, namely that he had only hours to live. Presented with this document, after having been made very much aware that on their decision whether to continue with the hunger strike or to end it, rested the fate, the life or death of their comrade Sean McKenna. I have to say this because of the fact that not very many people are really aware of how really traumatic that particular situation was. I do not want to try to, as we say, hog this interview. But there are so many issues that are so very, very important that I would really hope that you would give me a little bit of time to put you fully in the picture. I will be as brief as I possibly can.
Yes, well, would you go back to the reason for the hunger strike, the 53 days, and what the political prisoners are protesting?
The reason for the embarking of the first hunger strike was because of the fact that after March 1st, 1976, the political status which had been granted in 1972 by the then Secretary of State, William Whitelaw, was being withdrawn from any person arrested and charged with a political offence. That meant, basically, that a person arrested and charged with an alleged offence with a political motivation would not be recognised as a political prisoner, but would, in actual fact, be classified as a common criminal. The first person to appear before the court after March 1st, 1976 was a young Belfast man, Keir Nugent. And on being sentenced in a diplock court, that is a non-jury court, at which the only evidence presented is a document, allegedly a confession, by the person who is facing this diplock court. On the basis of a statement that he had allegedly made after being interrogated for 7 days in Castlereagh Interrogation Centre under emergency powers legislation, Section 12, which meant, and still means, that a person can be arrested, taken along to Castlereagh Interrogation Centre, be denied access to solicitor, doctor, priest, relative, for a total of 7 days. In other words, held for a period of 7 days, completely and totally incommunicative. During that period of time, the people in the interrogation centre are tortured, and this has been proved, physically and psychologically.
Excuse me a second, but back in 76, the European Commission for Human Rights condemned Britain for its use of interrogation techniques. Mm-hmm. And I thought that Amnesty International had issued many reports of the physical torture and the frequent beatings. So what happened between 76 and 80? Did they just ignore this?
Britain did not recognise that she was guilty of anything illegal. She did not recognise this fact.
Well, may we just have another opinion? May I ask you, Professor Harvey, how could Britain not have recognized this?
When you read the documentary evidence, when you see the kind of physical treatment and psychological treatment that these prisoners have been subject to over the years, it's very hard to see how Britain could not have recognized it. In effect, of course, they did recognize it, but they sought to justify it. They recognized that they had used, at least at the very minimum, inhuman and degrading treatment. They balked at the word torture, and certainly in these court terms, one man's torture is another man's inhuman and degrading treatment. But they were found guilty by the European Commission of having used torture. When the British government refused to recognise that, it went to the European Court of Human Rights, which found them guilty of a slightly lesser charge of inhuman and degrading treatment. But the British claimed that they have discontinued these methods. Nevertheless, ever since the court judgment, there have been continued publications, including the 1978 Amnesty International report, the 1979 British government-sponsored Bennett report, which have clearly made plain that the conditions under which those people are kept are diabolical. I have myself visited an interrogation centre in Northern Ireland, and I'm no expert in psychological pressure. I'm no expert in physical pressures, but I can tell you that I would sign a confession of having murdered my own mother if I were forced to stay in a place like that for 7 days and subjected to the kind of 15-hour-a-day interrogations which have been frequently found to have taken place.
Mm-hmm. Well, what would have happened if they had not discontinued the hunger strike in December, and what if one of those political prisoners had died? What would have actually occurred? I mean, it would have been a dreadful thing, but what could have happened? What protests could have been made by Ireland?
Well, I think it would probably... I think everybody agrees, Candy, that if that had happened, it would be the signal for outright bloodshed. And that was another reason for the long paper rigmarole that Mr. Gallagher is talking about, and about the fact that it was read out to the prisoners, and consequently they discontinued that hunger strike, only to find out that all of the promises that were contained in those papers were not lived up to. And that's why they're back again on hunger strike. It is because of the fact that they were fooled and tricked into it by a pronouncement of the British government that has caused them everything that they wanted, that was promised to them, and the strike was ended among jubilations of that bloodshed had been avoided, that somehow or other that reasonable human treatment would have prevailed with respect to, these things had been condemned by the Haldane Society, of which my learned colleague Richard Harvey is a member, a very distinguished law society in England, and by the National Council of Civil Liberties, a London-based group of lawyers who have looked into it and found out these things that we're talking about are true, and by, insofar as the treatment of prisoners are concerned, by the Howard League for Prison Reform, a very distinguished and well-known and well-regarded British organization. So that what we're talking about here are not charges, they are matters of proof by the most distinguished and well-known and respected members of these various professions. And the wonder is that they are continuing, and that they are continuing as of tonight.
Yes. Mrs. Gallagher, what do you hope to accomplish by your trip to America?
Well, I think actually that the result of the by-election in Fermanagh and South Tyrone today has given me the greatest hope for the successful conclusion of this tour, in that today the people of Fermanagh, South Tyrone, elected as their representative Bobby Sands, the hunger striker in Longcash prison.
Now, he's this 27-year-old young man, and he'd been on the hunger strike for 41 days.
That is correct.
And he would live for only another several weeks. Is this part of the dreadful prediction that we've heard?
Yeah, that's about right. I think it seems it's a little difficult to fully understand the importance of Ms. Gallagher's statements here, that this election is so significant. Bobby Sands is the man who negotiated the last truce by which the hunger strike was ended. He was betrayed, and so consequently he went back on hunger strike again.
I see.
Now, in the meantime, one John Maguire, a member of Parliament from Fermanagh Tyrone, died, leaving a vacancy. And all parties withdrew, leaving Bobby Sands, who was symbolic with betrayal, leaving him the road free to represent the minority in the Fermanagh Tyrone area. And Bernadette Devlin spoke for him, Neil Blaney spoke from him, all of the people, the leaders who had sort of concentrated, because not that they might have agreed with Bobby Sands, nor with, as a matter of fact, the Irish Republican Army, of which he is a member. And neither, perhaps, do members of this panel. But the symbolism was clear, that we had a man who was serving in this capacity, who was betrayed again, and that every effort to bring about some piece of humanity was shattered by the British government that he would be the candidate, and he is now a member of the British House of Commons as of tonight, even though his days are numbered as a prisoner if he continues on hunger strike, which he probably will.
It's a remarkable, remarkable statement. We are going to pause. We have some commercials coming up, and we'll be back and pick up our discussion.
What do you mean Nazis should be allowed to march? What do you mean pornography's okay for kids? What do you mean America's through? I'm Barry Farber, and I'll warn you, they'll stop at nothing until they reach the Barry Farber Show right here on WMCA 6 midnights a week from Monday through Saturday. The Barry Farber Show, brand new, right here on WMCA midnights, Monday through Saturday.
This reminder from CMK Incorporated of Rahway, take this moment out to consider our senior citizens. Just a few small courtesies and a little friendly help can brighten the day for many of the elderly. So take a few minutes out of your life to bring happiness to theirs. This message is paid for by CMK Incorporated, the number one name in the manufacture of clothes hangers. I'm Candy Jones. This is WMCA Strauss Communications in New York. We're speaking with Richard Harvey, with Reverend Paul Abels, with Father Don Kenna, with Paul O'Dwyer and Kathleen Gallagher. Reverend Abels, I'm sure that you would like to say something about this. I know that you'd been over in Northern Ireland last fall with the Berrigan brothers.
Right. Well, the eye-opening experience of having traveled there was very important for me, and I think is essential for most people to have any grasp of the situation in Northern Ireland. It is at least highly complex. The subtleties are very hard for those even who are most involved with the issue full-time, so to speak, to comprehend and to deal with, so I don't claim to be an expert on all of those. But one thing was made very clear to me in that visit. We visited with relatives of prisoners and heard heart-rending, excruciating stories of suffering and death that occurred to immediate and close members of their families, as well as the continuing suffering that was going on within the prisons at that time and of course, continue. We are especially honored that Kathleen Gallagher has come to represent the National H-Block Committee of Ireland, which had hosted our visit there, and we hope that her visit here to the United States will be widely heard. I am especially interested as a Protestant clergyman, a rather rare figure in this movement I discover, to engage more Protestants in an understanding of the issue and try to mobilize them in any way that I can to help with the human rights cause in Northern Ireland.
Yes. And Father Kenna, you too were on the same trip last fall. What would you like to say? We are coming up to the news, and then we're going to continue on right after the news.
I would like to say simply that before we went on the trip, I was not a full-time member of the New York H-Block Unmarked Committee. Having gone to Ireland, having experienced the interpretation of reality given by the English government to what is going on there, I became a full-time member.
There's a lot more to this story which we must unravel, and we'll do that right after the news. I'm Candy Jones. This is WMCA, Strauss Communications in New York, and yes, we will open the phones later after the news. And the news is going to come to you right now from the Associated Press Radio Network.
Just when astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen will go shuttling into space is still undecided tonight. But NASA people are working on what went wrong today, trying to nail it down so they can announce a time for another launch attempt. They narrowed down their trouble this evening, finding a synchronization problem between a backup computer and the primary computer on the Space Shuttle Columbia. NASA spokesman Hugh Harris.
The STS-1 mission can be launched no earlier than Sunday, April 12th. No firm reschedule of the launch effort, which ended in postponement at 10 a.m. today, has yet been established, but the launch team is proceeding on a schedule that could lead to launch Sunday if the computer problems which led to today's scrub is resolved.
Apparently, those problems are not totally worked out at this hour, and NASA says there may be some decision by noon tomorrow on whether the spacecraft can leave the pad Sunday morning. The weather is predicted to be good for Sunday and the next few days after that. Today's edition of the Budget Battle, Senate Budget Committee leader, Republican Pete Domenici, said he'll do what he can to see that the president's economic plan makes it through his committee. His panel voted yesterday to turn down the Reagan plan as it is. Domenici did not rule out the possibility of some overtures to Democrats on the panel to change their minds. Budget Director Stockman took the committee's action rather lightly, calling it an accounting problem. He insisted the Congress will, in the final analysis, go along with the president's script for an economic program. This is Rob Vaughn in Washington. United Mine Workers spokesman Eldon Callan had word tonight that a bargaining session has been set to deal with the miners' strike against soft coal operators. Callan said representatives for the two sides will talk Tuesday, something they haven't done for some time. The union's bargaining council had promised to stay in Washington to put pressure on the operators to return to the table. The operators had said earlier they did not see any resumption of the talks coming soon. But UMW President Sam Church had a phone conversation this evening with the industry's chief negotiator. Spokesman Callan revealed nothing about the conversation. President Reagan, apparently on the road to recovery, will apparently be back in the White House tomorrow. Dr. Dennis O'Leary of Georgetown University Hospital says Mr. Reagan should be able to work half days soon, though he won't travel right away. The White House put off a trip to Mexico for the president. O'Leary says doctors found some whiteness along the bullet track in Mr. Reagan's chest.
On the chest x-ray this morning, in the area of the bullet track, which is an area that will eventually scar down, there's a little lucent or transparent area that's a little bit less than a half-inch in diameter. And it's an area that we would like to watch for another 24 hours or so before we definitively commit ourselves to a discharge.
O'Leary of George Washington University Hospital said the president coughed up some blood from that area today, but that apparently won't hinder his return to the business of running the government. A Cuban refugee tried to hijack an airliner to Havana today, but after grabbing a stewardess and setting a fire on board, the man scuffled with an airline employee and a passenger and then died. Some witnesses said the man had taken a small pill before his death, but the FBI discounted those reports this evening, saying they don't know yet the cause of the man's death. The Reagan administration went on record today in favor of legislation permitting the death penalty for some federal crimes, among them espionage and the killing of a president. This is the AP radio network. The town of Randall, Washington had some more gray rain again today. More light ash from Mount St. Helens, which again sent a plume of steam and ash almost 3 miles high. Scientists said it was a small, isolated eruption. They were still recording seismic activity late into the day. There was some concern, however, about the possibility of flooding. Susan Russell Robinson of the U.S. Geological Survey.
The National Weather Service has issued a flash flood watch. This is because there is a snowpack. Approximately 3 to 6 feet of snow, possibly some more, in the vicinity of Mount St. Helens. All the drainages, if there was a sudden snow melt with a hot potted plastic material or other hot material going on the snow would melt instantaneously, and this would produce sudden high waters.
The survey scientists say today's eruption was nothing like the blast last May 18th in terms of magnitude. That big one left 61 people dead or missing. Officials continue to keep an eye on the mountain tonight. You'll remember the reports of a possible link between coffee drinking and cancer of the pancreas. Well, a major coffee producer isn't taking too kindly to the study released last month. Chock-full of Nuts ran newspaper ads in 33 cities today to denounce the Harvard findings. The chairman of the firm is quoted in the ads as saying, "I don't question the validity of the research team. I do question the validity of the study." That study found a quote-unquote unexpected relationship between coffee drinking and pancreatic cancer. That's the news from the AP Radio Network. This is Rob Vaughn.
Here we are again, Candy Jones. We're talking about lies and broken promises, and now another hunger strike at Longkesh and Armagh. My guests, Richard Harvey, Reverend Paul Abels, Father Don Kenna, Paul O'Dwyer, and Kathleen Gallagher. And we will open the phones in a little while, but I'd like to have a little bit more of the story unravel. Mrs. Gallagher, when you left Ireland, which was, I guess, just yesterday, what was the mood in Longkesh and Armagh?
The mood in Longkesh in particular was the hope that Bobby Sands, who was then on the 40th day of his hunger strike, would be successful in the election in the Fermanagh, South Tyrone. And if I may, with your permission, very briefly put you in the picture with regard to this election. This was no ordinary common or garden election. This was an election in which Bobby Sands, the candidate, if he was elected, this was the thinking then, had no intention whatsoever of taking up the seat at Westminster, nor had he any aspirations to become an MP in Westminster. The aim and the reason for him allowing his name to be put forward as a candidate was to prove to the world that if elected, which thank God we are now aware he has been, that the electorate in Fermanagh and South Tyrone would prove to the world at large that what Mrs. Thatcher and the British government were saying to the world at large, that there was no support for the hunger strikers in Longkesh, and that the people in Ireland did not care whether they lived or whether they died. By his election, by the electorate in Fermanagh and South Tyrone, that message has now become very, very clear. We do care, and we will not stand idly by and allow Mrs. Thatcher and the British government to allow our Irish political prisoners to die.
How many political prisoners are there, men and women?
Men on the blanket protest, that is men who were sentenced after March 1st, 1976, and who are, at this moment in time, on the blanket protest, that is on protest against the appraisal and the decision of the British government to classify them as common criminals. Numbers 450. And it is also worthy of mention that of these 450 young prisoners on blanket protest, an amazing percentage of 85 are under the age of 25 years old.
Women too?
That applies also to the women. There are 27 women on the protest in Armagh Jail.
Mm-hmm.
That applies to them as well.
I think, just in case some of our listeners have not really been following this story, I think you gentlemen should tell what it means to be on the blanket, what H block is.
H is the physical shape of the buildings in which the prisoners are housed. The cells in which they have been housed, the protest is a complex one. It goes back right to 1976 with the denial of what the British called special category status and what is, in any layman's terms, political status. With that withdrawal, prisoners said, no, we will not accept the classification as common criminals. We will not be forced to wear prison uniform. That was the bottom line of the protest. And therefore, on the blanket means simply you have nothing else to wear but a prison blanket put round your shoulders.
How long are they in their cells every day?
24 hours.
They're not out at all?
They get half an hour if they're lucky, but essentially it's 24 hours, isn't it, Kathleen?
Yes.
Mm.
Well, with respect, if I might just say that since the 24th of January, when the men themselves decided to end the dirty protest, that is the term that is used for it. What it in actual fact means is that the men were not allowed to go out to use the toilets. Therefore, they had to use the cells as toilets and exist in those conditions for 24 hours. Their intention and their reason for ending the no wash, no slop out protest was to focus all attention on the hunger strike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What has Mrs. Thatcher's reaction been to this?
Gross.
Gross, did you say?
Gross, I said, Paul.
Well, the reaction, we've gone through in this country a wave of sort of friendship. The picture, the quiet, warm picture of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher sort of enjoying a quiet tea, and then no Irish-American politician or anybody else suggesting that perhaps she may be asked what was happening in North of Ireland, because we didn't really want to be impolite. The first thing that Margaret Thatcher did when she left this country was to go to the north of Ireland and go to the very towns on the border, a border which had been created by Great Britain, and speak to the people on both sides of that border by way of assurance that the old order was to continue into the indefinite future. And then, having done that, she returned to London.
And that was it?
That was it.
Well, so nothing was done?
Nothing was done, absolutely. They had anything sort of suggestive of the action taken by de Gaulle, anything suggestive of the action taken by Margaret Thatcher in Africa, which was very commendable. Mm-hmm. That really never occurred to them to apply the same rules and to take the same precaution and outlook with respect to Northern Ireland.
There was a certain air of hope when Carter was still president that some gesture would be made by the American government toward the British government regarding the situation in Northern Ireland, but that hope was clearly dashed with the present administration being installed. And I think that the hope of all of us has been diminished, that in any case that our American government will play any role in any action to diminish the suffering of the prisoners in Northern Ireland.
Whatever happened to human rights?
We're all asking that question. Well, I think that human rights are going to go to the streets. It's been done before, and I think it will happen again, and the power really is with the people in this regard. Human rights have never been the province of government particularly, and I think that the people will have to make this their action, our action.
Mm-hmm. Father Kenneth?
Well, I think we should connect to this something that's very close to home. Some people ask us when we go around speaking on the subject why we're talking about Ireland on the other side of the ocean and why we don't speak about things here. It's because all human rights are interconnected. In fact, we have right here in a jail in this very city a man who is very closely connected to the struggle in Northern Ireland. He left the Republic of Ireland several months ago.
Is this Dessie Macken?
That's right. And he has been in jail for the last 5 months, and his hearings ended yesterday, and he has to wait 5 more weeks for a decision now in jail to be extradited to the north of Ireland, though he came from the south. And the United States government is asking, the British government has asked the United States government for the extradition. The United States government is struggling very hard to send him back to the north where his life is clearly in danger.
Why would we want to do that?
Well, this is a question of human rights right under our own eyes here in this city.
Well, what is it that Dessie Macken had done, allegedly?
The government in Northern Ireland is claiming that he that he had a gun, that he fired upon a group of soldiers in broad daylight. The soldiers outnumbered him and a companion of his. His companion was shot. He was shot. No gun was found. There was no forensic ballistic evidence that he had a gun. This is all testimony from the British government. And his companion was acquitted.
Richard Harvey,
more
my colleague here knows all about that case. He's participated in it. He's aware of it from Northern Ireland, and he participated in it here in the defense of Dessie Macken. I'm sure that he could enlighten us on it.
I think one of the most important exceptions to the general law that a person charged with an offence in one country may be if found in another country, extradited back to stand trial. One of the most important exceptions to that rule is that where the offence is political, then there should not be extradition. And in this particular case, we have a series of courts which have been established in Northern Ireland that Kathleen's already referred to, the non-jury Diplock courts. We have an amount of legislation which no country operating under what we would normally conceive of as human rights or civil liberties would ever allow passed onto the statute book. And we have, in essence, the attempt in Northern Ireland by the British government to control the province has taken historically two forms. From 1969 to 1972, the form was military control. From 1972 to now, the form has been judicial control. And my position is, and I think all of us here would agree, that any attempt to solve political problems by military means is just as bad as any attempt to solve political problems by judicial means. It only brings the courts into disrepute, it brings justice into disrepute, and that is the state of justice in Northern Ireland today. There is no popular confidence in the courts that try people like Dessie Mackin. And that is why Dessie Mackin is in this country. That is why Dessie Mackin went to the Republic when he was given bail. I wouldn't wish to go into the merits of the case. Don Cannon's already done that. But as far as the politics of the case is concerned, it is quite clearly a case where a man is charged with being what is called a terrorist. Terrorist is legally defined as a person who uses violence for political ends. And what could be a clearer definition of political crime than that? Nobody seriously suggests that those prisoners who are in Longkesh and Armagh jail today would ever have run foul of the law for so much as a traffic ticket, had it not been for the politics that created the state of Northern Ireland. And that is the bottom line here. It's a political case, it's a political problem, and it must, to that problem, a political solution must be found. With the election today of Bobby Sands, we come so much nearer the recognition of that.
Elaborate a little on that there. It is very clear that despite what Mrs. Thatcher and the British government are trying to do, that is to call these young men common criminals, they are not in any sense of the word common criminals. If one is arrested and charged with an ordinary common felony, one is not taken to an interrogation centre. One is not forced to go through the awful procedure within the interrogation centre. One is not arrested under emergency legislation. One is not charged before a Diplock non-jury court. So it is as clear to anyone who is concerned with justice that special powers and special conditions must automatically, at the end of it, produce special prisoners.
What I don't understand is why the British are insisting upon this criminal status.
One of the things I think, Candy, that would be clear to us here in this country is that if you know that in Great Britain there's a system which is somewhat like our own. The Conservatives are in for a while and then they get thrown out, and the Labour gets in. We have Republicans are in for a while, they get thrown out, and Democrats get in and they're in for a while, and then the other side come in. Now you got the same situation there, except that in Northern Ireland you got 12 or 14 Conservatives, and they play ball with one or the other. And so consequently, this is the political football by which the Conservative Party or the Labour Party wish to stay in power through these people who are the so-called loyalists that come from the north of Ireland. And the people, Protestant and Catholic, have to suffer by virtue of that. I want to tell you there is absolutely no religious problems in north of Ireland. Nobody cares about the Council of Trent. And nobody cares about any other theory of Catholic or various Methodist or Presbyterian or Church of Ireland philosophy. Nobody stops anybody from going into church. It is all who gets the jobs. And it's precisely the same as I found in Mississippi between blacks and whites. and all the other trappings with respect to it have to do with how you manipulate people. And now, it is fair to say that when we had our problems in Vietnam, 62% of the people of the United States wanted out. I think it's significant to say that 72% of the people of Great Britain, in an equally reliable poll, have decided the other day they want their people to withdraw. So there is another force which has nothing to do with the people. And I pointed out before of the lawyers in Great Britain, the lawyers in London, Amnesty International, National Council of Civil Liberties, the Haldane Society, of which Mr. Richard Harvey belongs. All of these people have protested loudly and in clear voice to their own government. And indeed, very frequently, the London Times has called the government to task, both Labour and Conservative, of why they wish to, they insist upon continuing when they've gone from the rest of the empire since 1947. And it is a problem for the people of England, even as a problem for us.
We are going to open the phones right after these messages. Our numbers are 489-1155 and in New Jersey, 624-6855.
Hi, Barry Gray, and on Monday at noon, give or take a minute, I'm going to be talking with one of the great war correspondents and peace correspondents of the world. Wherever the story has been, he's been in the thick of it. He'll be here, live on WMCA, in this very studio at noon on Monday, with me, Barry Gray.
WMCA Call for Action has a message for pet owners who'd like to avoid unwanted puppies or kittens and help cut down the overpopulation of dogs and cats in the city. If money is a problem, call Friends of Animals in Manhattan for details about their low-cost spaying program. That's Friends of Animals in Manhattan.
With a water shortage, everyone's conserving, but a broken water meter is no fun. You can't tell what a good job you're doing, saving our precious water supply. So you should call Virtue Water Meter Repair Service for repairs on all makes at 201-945-2915. That's 201-945-2915. Virtue Water Meter Repair Service, 570 Gorge Road, Cliffside Park, urging everyone to support your local blood bank today. We're going to the phones. May I give you our names, the names of our guests once again, and I think we do need one other headset in here. We're short just one. Oh, is there one over there? Fine. Richard Harvey, Professor of International Human Rights and Comparative Law at the Center for Legal Education and Urban Policy, CCNY. He's a British barrister. Reverend Paul Abels, pastor of Washington Square Methodist Church. Father Don Kenna, a Brooklyn Catholic priest. Paul O'Dwyer, who's in private practice in New York with the law firm O'Dwyer and Bernstein. And our visitor, Kathleen Gallagher, currently in America as the representative of the National H-Block Armagh Committee. And she's the first representative to have been sent to our shores by the committee. And she is the founder and the secretary of the Dairy Committee for Prisoners' Welfare. Our number is 489-1155, New Jersey 624-6855. You're on WMCA. Hello.
Yes. Hello, Kathleen. How are you?
Hello.
Kedmi Lafalcha once again to America.
Thank you very much.
Listen, you mentioned the Diplock courts a while back.
Yes.
I would like you to tell Candy and the listeners what this means, that Lord Diplock was the inventor of these courts, and that Lord Diplock was a great pal of all the other lords in the House of Lords, including Lord Mountbatten. And they were all very energetic and vigorous in passing all kinds of laws to further tie up Irishmen in subjection to British rule. And when any of these lords gets hurt, everybody wonders why that is. Would you tell them about the Diplock courts and how Lord Diplock formed them, Kathleen?
Kathleen, briefly, you'd like to expound upon that?
The Diplock courts came into being after the March 1st, 1976, when political status was withdrawn from anyone charged at that particular date. The Diplock court is very briefly a court in which there is a judge and no jury, and the only evidence presented and with which the persons concerned are charged is an alleged confession extracted after a period of being in an interrogation centre for a period of from 3 to 7 days. It is the injustice of the Diplock courts that are a result of the men in Long Kesh and the women in Armagh Jail.
Right, I thank you. You're on WMCA. Hello.
Well, I'd like to ask Mr. O'Dwyer or anybody on the panel, how does the murder by the IRA of 80-year-old Lord Louis Mountbatten, his grandson and daughter, advance the cause that these people on your program advocate?
No act of violence advances any cause, anytime, anywhere. And that is one that has to be condemned as well as any other act of violence by anybody.
All right. Thank you. You're on WMCA.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. I'd like to bring up the point about the religion, which particularly bothers me in that the New York Times, refers to the situation in Northern Ireland as tribal warfare, which is a very degrading way to describe what goes on in Northern Ireland. I just did an analysis today, as a matter of fact. I looked at 21 countries in Western Europe, and I find that there's a great mixture of religions and ethnic groups throughout Europe. And if one believes that religion is a problem in Northern Ireland, why is it only in Northern Ireland, as compared to 21 countries, that religion is a problem there? If one would believe what the English are saying. And I'd like to put to the English barrister...
Why don't we answer that, first of all, Father Kenneth?
Well, I think, as Paul O'Dwyer just mentioned a few minutes ago, the struggle in Northern Ireland has no resemblance to a religious struggle at all. That is not what the struggle is about. It's being used and being spoken of as a religious struggle in order to keep people divided.
And what was your second question?
The second question I'd like to put to Mr. Harvey, I believe his name is, why does Prime Minister Thatcher seem to go out of her way to placate and extend the guarantee in capital letters to Ian Paisley?
It's a very good question. I'm not here as her apologist. One of the odd features of the whole business is that the British government seems so determined tenaciously to hold on to Northern Ireland. One of the startling statistics are always very confusing, but this one's bald enough for anybody. The British Army has been in Northern Ireland longer than it's been engaged in any war anywhere else in the world since they fought Napoleon. And that goes back to 1815. And there is obviously something horribly sinister at stake to make them want to hold on that hard and that long. But you'll have to ask Mrs. Thatcher for the answer.
Okay, good question. You're on WMCA. It's Candy. I don't know what that was. It sounded like an earthquake. You're on WMCA.
Hello?
Hello.
I'm a little hazy on a definition of that was bandied about a little bit. Mrs. Gallagher mentioned something about politically motivated offense. There was a definition that a terrorist group is politically motivated, and where I have a little problem is the persons who tried to assassinate Truman, or the one that shot President Reagan, or the PLOs, they, to their minds at least, are politically motivated. Now, would they be given political status under your idea of whatever it is that you're saying?
You have to take up each case by itself. You can't just bunch them all together.
You can't bunch them all together?
No, you cannot. It's impossible
to say this.
Wait a minute, let me answer it, sir. When somebody comes before a court, there are certain sets of rules of evidence which have to be adhered to, and there are long explanations to be given. For instance, in the Mackin trial the other day, a State Department official came to testify on behalf of the British government, and he was asked whether or not George Washington wouldn't have been a terrorist. And he had to admit that the difference between a terrorist and a president is one whether he wins or loses.
Well, is that the same for the PLO?
I'm not too sure that it is. I wouldn't be able to tell you about the PLO generally speaking, but I would be able to tell you about any given individual that's called in before our courts and our courts used in connection with it.
Would you just do this, please? No one has, we've heard programs before about this. Would you at least just mention what crimes the British government convicted these 7 that were on hunger strike, please? I'll hang up and listen.
The 7 that were on hunger strike? Well, I can tell you that they were called up under the provision of the Diplock Law. The Diplock Law was initiated so as to give the authorities 7 days in which to torture any prisoner before taking them before the court. And then taking them before a court, denying them a jury which is given, according to the British, to decent criminals, those charged with rape and murder and highway robbery. And they are given no more the rights to either counsel or to visit from family or doctor for this period of 7 days until a confession is beaten out of them in the fashion which was proven before the Commission of Human Rights and the conviction of Great Britain of torture by whatever name it is given in an impartial court in Europe. Now, these are the facts. They are not fiction. They are not charges of either people who are interested in human rights or those who are not interested in human rights. They are things which are undeniable. They have been proven already.
And I think just to, this may be redundant, but thousands of Irish men and women have been held for up to 7 days without a charge. And then they're tried by these non-jury courts. And over 80% of the convictions have no evidence except the confessions that are extracted by documented torture during interrogation.
In addition to that, in fact, a lot of these people are arrested with there never being any intention of them being brought to trial. They're arrested as part of a mass ongoing surveillance program to get them in, get out of them what information they can, and fully 1/3 of them never get prosecuted at all. But they will spend between 3 and 7 days in custody in the most oppressive conditions imaginable.
All right, we'll go back to you on the phones. You're on WMCA.
Yes, Candy. I just read the funny thing. I had the magazine section of the Times, March 7th, 1981, and I refer you all to page 56 when you get a chance to read it. Mr. Harvey, is this the SAS that is doing this to the Irish?
The SAS is patrolling all over Northern Ireland in plain clothes, undercover. These are, for those who don't know, the Special Air Service allegedly crack regiment. Their prime object seems to be to try and crack the Irish. They have been patrolling all over Northern Ireland for several years now.
Are they using microwave and radiation behavior modification as they are in this country and abroad?
I'll let Kathleen take that, if I may.
Yes, this is indeed so. This is true. They are. It has been proved beyond all shadow of a doubt that this they are doing.
All the priests are going to really research this subject, because I happen to be a victim, and so are my neighbors and friends. And I will contact you, Father, because this is time for the church to acknowledge that this is a technology being used, and it's a terrible thing, and we've been under it for quite some time.
Okay.
All right, I thank you. You're on WMCA.
Paul Bosco.
You're on WMCA.
Yes, Mr. O'Dwyer, please.
Yes.
Mr. O'Dwyer, I've been listening to you speak about the British in Northern Ireland, and it seems so that you're trying to carry on the same type of propagandist and smear campaign that you carried upon our Vietnamese allies. Now,
oh, you're back again.
How are you, dear?
Where have you been? I thought you'd gone to Russia.
No, I've reformed, Candy.
No.
You've changed me, Candy.
Good. At least I've done one good thing.
Can I finish, Candy? Can I finish?
You might as well.
All right. Now, given the regime that took over in Southeast Asia, became nothing more than a Soviet satellite, don't you think with the strong links that the IRA now has to various leftist terrorist governments throughout the world, that the Soviet Union would like nothing more than to establish a satellite nation with strategic links to the North Sea oil fields and the Icelandic gap. England is the great ally of this country.
Is this Al Haig speaking?
And therefore,
No, it's Bosco.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Sir?
Yes, dear.
Do you want to... Don't call me, dear. Do you want to just wrap up whatever it is you want to say just for tonight?
Well, you didn't listen to what I said, so there's no...
No, I really didn't. No. Okay. We are going to pause. We have some commercials coming up, and we'll go back to our sane callers.
Tom Seaver has an important announcement to make. What is it, Tom?
I've just joined a new team.
Now, what's that, Tom?
Telecom.
That's right, and they're the leader in interconnect telephone systems and the major distributor of NEC telephone equipment. And I guess, Tom, you've learned they're the best.
You know, in my game, I've learned you're never going to be the best unless you give it your all. And when it comes to designing, installing, maintaining, and servicing private business phone systems, Telecom is number one.
Now, Telecom will custom design a phone system for your business.
And they'll stand behind it with service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
With Telecom, you're getting the best phone system for your dollar, right, Tom?
Listen to me. Call today and find out how a phone system from Telecom can start working for you and your business. After all, would Tom Seaver ever want to pitch for anything but a winning team?
Telecom, the business phone company. For further information, call Bob Dorskin, Vice President at Telecom, at 212-392-7700. That's 392-7700.
What do you mean Nazis should be allowed to march? What do you mean pornography's okay for kids? What do you mean America's through? I'm Barry Farber, and I'll warn you, they'll stop at nothing until they reach the Barry Farber Show right here on WMCA 6 midnights a week from Monday through Saturday. The Barry Farber Show, brand new, right here on WMCA midnights, Monday through Saturday.
Say on Sunday night, starting at midnight, we're going to be talking with some people who think it's wonderful to be large in size, fat. Do you? Most people are trying to be slender, but be sure to be with us. I think it'll be an interesting discussion. Our number is 489-1155. You're on WMCA. Your radio.
To get on the show.
Your radio is on, but you are on WMCA.
I turned it off.
Good.
What do I do? Should just hold on?
No, you're on right now. This is Candy.
Hello, Candy?
Yes, hello.
I'm delighted. Candy, I enjoy your show. It's just terrific.
Thank you.
But I am calling you for another reason. I'm a retired dentist, and I listened to Sloan and Block the other night. And is there any way I could get in touch with them? It's very important for me.
I really wouldn't know. The only thing I could suggest is that on Monday you call the station and ask for program information. I just couldn't help you on that. You're on WMCA.
Bosco.
You see what I mean? You're on WMCA.
Hello?
Hello, go ahead.
Yes. I'm the person, I'm calling about the radio show.
You're on right now.
Oh. Okay. I'm someone who's fairly new to the H-block situation, and one of the things that puzzles me is that whenever I do read anything about Northern Ireland, it always refers to terrorists, and I just wonder why it is that I never hear any of the history or background behind H-block.
Well, we've been talking about it on this program.
Right, yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm just trying, the question is that are there any clues as to why the American press in general doesn't seem to, want all this stuff to come out?
It's an interesting question. Would anyone here have some reason they could express as to why there might be a block out of this information?
It's very difficult to convince the American public that a nation like Great Britain, with whom we've had such ties over a long period of time, and with whom we've fought 2 wars in this century on behalf of democracy. Certainly one of them was our question, a great humanitarian endeavor. It's very difficult to think of Great Britain as acting like the behind the Iron Curtain countries or dictatorial powers. And yet it's true, but the ties are so strong. I'd say most people in this country have a good feeling towards Great Britain. They also have a good feeling towards Ireland. They just simply don't want to take sides with this situation, and the press is very much influenced by Great Britain. Also, our State Department has been really acting as a satellite of Great Britain for almost since Evacuation Day. And they've gone into this habit, and they seem not to be able, even to the point where one of them came down the other day to the federal court to help the government of Great Britain to extradite Desi Mackin and testified on behalf of the British. This is 3 days ago. This is almost incredible. That's what Father Cannon and myself were talking about a few moments ago. This thing has crept into the walls and in behind the scenes, into the editorial rooms of the various newspapers and even into radio and television.
And yet there have been congressmen who have gone to Northern Ireland. I remember we had Congressman Hamilton Fish, and we've had others on who have gone over to try to see for themselves exactly what's going on, and yet nothing seems to happen of a positive nature.
I think people over here still have, to a great extent, the image of the friendly British Bobby. I won't go into how friendly he is in Britain, but the one thing that is absolutely clear is that your ordinary British Bobby on the beat is not armed. And people all over the world look to Britain as the country that decided not to arm its police force, and heaven prevent us from the day that when our police force uses its firepower in the way that the police forces do in this country. But in Northern Ireland, you have precisely the reverse. You have police not just armed, but militarized, in the sense that you have to go there in order to see it. In this country, there is a great will not to know what is going on, because it is just unthinkable that so-called British police, and of course they're not, they're police operating in Ireland, so-called British police should be driving around in Land Rovers with the most high-powered rifles in the world, which incidentally the New York Police Department refused to have because their power was too high.
Well, there's a little brief history.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're on WMCA.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm so glad. Am I speaking to you, Candy?
Yes, you are.
I'm so concerned about the problem in Northern Ireland. Oh, my concern. It's such a terrible thing. You know, and I'm Irish, you know. My parents came from Ireland. And it seems like you're treating it in such a flip way. You know, you're saying, well. You know, it's not well, although a well is very deep. And you're very shallow, Candy.
Mm-hmm.
Candy, are you there?
Yes, I am, but you're not. You're on WMCA. Hello.
Hello, I'd like to ask Mr. O'Dwyer what we as Americans can do about this situation.
Well, I think if American people took seriously what has been happening, I think a great deal could be done. Could be done through perhaps our American politicians, people who represent us in Congress and people who represent us in the Senate. What I think would be an important development would be if our president, particularly, would try to convince Margaret Thatcher or the trade unionists in Great Britain as well that the links between us are deep-rooted, that we have really no reason to battle one another and every reason to be together. That if the one thing which is an embarrassment to us in the United States, the one thing which divides us, the one thing in a sense which makes us sort of question Great Britain's sincerity, is their handling of Northern Ireland, and try to convince them to leave and leave these people alone. Get out of the country. The Protestants and Catholics can get along well in Coventry and can get along well in London. Irish Catholics and Irish Protestants have got along for 350 years in this country, and there's no distinction and difference between them. And why couldn't they get along in their own native heath? And the only reason is because Great Britain is the method of interfering. And I think if that could be done not by shouting and not by demonstration, but by the diplomacy that both countries pride themselves in. And if that were to be done, and we have a role to play, we Americans have a role to play, both the individuals and the government. And I think that kind of a role could end this fracas in no time and bring peace into this area.
Do you think there's any value in writing to your congressman?
I do think that there is. You know, the very thing that you're talking about, the congressman from the Upper Hudson Valley that went over with a group and brought back their findings, placed them in the congressional record. They're there for all people to see. And these are things which make history, bring it to the public attention, so that American, you know, we who are all over the world, we're down pushing our nose into the variety of areas in every corner of the world to say that Northern Ireland is not our issue, not our question, when at least 8 presidents had their ancestors in that particular small area of the world.
It's something we often forget. Thank you. You're on WMCA. It's Candy.
Hello. I have a question for Mrs. Gallagher, please.
Yes.
First of all, I have been in Ireland 8 times in the past 2 years seeking justice for people who were imprisoned without due process of law. And also, they were not allowed to have a lawyer to defend them. This is in the Republic of Ireland. The people who were... there's a scandal involved here, and the people who were involved in it are threatening Paula Dwyer on me, telling me if I don't keep out of it, that they're going to get Paula Dwyer after me. Also, I have worked on both sides of the border over there, so I think that...
what was your question for Mrs. Gallagher?
Yes, okay, I'm getting to that. If anybody has a question for me, I have worked on both sides of that border for a long time, and I think that, you know, from listening to the show here, I think I could set some people straight here, especially people over here who know little or nothing of what's going on, and...
well, what did you want to ask Mrs.
You know, I can see right through these propaganda that's, you know, very evident here.
But I don't get your point. Did you have a question for Mrs. Gallagher?
I have a question for each one of you, if you give me enough time.
Well, we have a limited amount of time. Could you get to the point?
Okay. Now, I've just heard that you said that the Catholic Church it is not a religious question.
This is not a religious war, yes.
Why is the Catholic Church trying to dominate all of Ireland?
Well, I'm not going to pick that one up for the Catholic Church, and I don't think either of the 2 clergymen here are going to do it either.
Well, I think
that's a very long...
I think they should. It is a religious a religious problem.
There may be many religious questions with respect to the subject matter that you're talking about.
Well, I think, Paul, that we really need to make clear that it's fundamentally not a religious problem. It's a racist problem, and it's a class problem, and that we are we have great difficulty in this country trying to understand racism in our own selves and in our own society, and we certainly would have difficulty in understanding it in Ireland and in the way that the British have treated the Irish, but it is actually a racist problem and a racist issue. People in Ireland are second-class citizens. They're treated in the same fashion that the American white population treated the American black population for so many years, and still do, in fact. And for me, one of the great hopes that's emerging on the American scene is a rising consciousness of the presence of racism and its consequences in our life. And perhaps if we learn a little more about it in our own society, then we can start applying some of that in our attitudes toward Ireland, because I think it would be very helpful.
Mrs. Gallagher?
If I could just say a final word on that. It is very definitely not a religious question within the north of Ireland. It is very definitely a question of total and complete injustice, especially when we remember that we have also got 12 loyalist prisoners in Long Kesh protesting against their sentences in the first, for instance, and the decision of the British government also not to recognise them as political prisoners. So it is obviously not a question of religion. It is a question of injustice.
All right, I need a moment right now. I want to talk about drinking water. It's important for good health. But, of course, when you drink Mountain Valley water, it's taking a step up in drinking, whether you sip it plain or you mix it with juices or soups or the baby's formula or for making coffee, tea. You'll see Mountain Valley water is simply wonderful. And it comes from that totally protected spring out in Hot Springs, Arkansas, the one that's been in use for more than 100 years. And now you can discover for yourself why Mountain Valley water makes drinking a great, healthful pleasure. And you can have it delivered to your door by calling in New York, EX1-1112, or write to me, Candy Jones, in care of WMCA, New York, zip 119, and I'll see that you get some free facts about Mountain Valley water.
This is Ralph Howard, and I'd like your attention for the next minute or so, because if you like listening to WOR, WINS, or WCBS, I think it would be worth your while to try WMCA in the morning. Oh, I know that your morning habits are hard to change, and you can always switch back if you don't like what you hear. But let me assure you that you'll get all the news that you need and want to hear, plus incisive interviews, Ted Politek traffic reports, Danny Meenan's unique news reports, Joe Rayo's CompuWeather. And we cover the business scene with reports from the Wall Street Journal, Bruce Williams, and John Shoyer's Money Report. And you'll hear lively reviews from arts critic Joanna Langfield, and even astrological reports from Daryl Martini. So when your clock radio goes off, make sure it's been set to WMCA the night before. And that's all we're asking. Give us a try. You know where we are, and now you know who we are. Let's get to know each other better. AM 57 with me, Ralph Howard, and Gina Tedesco on WMCA. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's Ralph Howard. We'll go back to you on the phones on 489-1155. You're on WMCA. It's Candy.
Hello?
Hello?
Right. I'd like to ask Mr. Dwyer a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Could you comment on the evident erratic behavior of Mr. Paisley? He seems to be able to generate a lot of enthusiasm among his followers for marches and hillside rallies, most of which are not reported in the American press.
Well, I'm not going to come down too heavy on Mr. Paisley. Mr. Paisley is much a victim of the divisive tactics of Great Britain as some of the people who are on the Catholic side. Finally, people's behavior comes from the environment under which they live, the fears that are engendered into them. Sometimes the fears of the Reformation are continued when in truth there's no necessity for them any longer, but they're there. And if great capital is made out of them, then they will continue to produce leaders like Reverend Ian Paisley. There are certain aspects of Mr. Paisley that show signs of populism. And to that extent, I have seen some amazing things happen with respect to him.
You're being very charitable, Mr. O'Dwyer.
Well, I'm inclined to be charitable to the victims of oppression. And I think Mr. Paisley is a victim of oppression just as I think Bobby Sands is a victim of oppression. And I can't be charitable to one and not extend it to the other.
Well, that's fair. I thank you.
Thank you.
You're on WMCA. You're on WMCA. Hello.
Candy Jones.
New Jersey, yes.
I don't agree with Mr. O'Dwyer when he says that the American politicians should get involved with Ireland no more than he thinks they should get involved with El Salvador. They got enough to do to protect themselves against the Ayatollah whom O'Dwyer represents. I will make one suggestion. When he was in a warehouse, and he knows what I'm talking about, packing ammunition for another country, he should have packed it for Ireland, and maybe this thing would have been over. Thank you.
That's that. That's New Jersey. You're on WMCA. Hello.
Here's my test.
Any of you might know something about the various churches of the 7 churches.
Don't know about those 7 churches. You're on WMCA. Hello.
Hello?
Yes.
The statement was made before that some people don't believe in the injustices that go on in Northern Ireland. And I just like to very briefly relate a case that I'm familiar with. I met a fellow in this country who has done time in long cash, and I had mentioned to him that I was going to make a visit to Ireland. In fact, my first visit, which I made last August. And he asked, would you like to visit my brother, who is in Crumlin Road Prison at that time? And I said, sure, I'll visit him. So when I got to Ireland, I went to visit the boy's mother, and the mother told me that how the fellow got in Crumlin Road Prison, and very simply that there was a shooting in the area, and the Army and the police came around, and they took the two boys into Castlereagh, where the police run Castlereagh, and they very bluntly said to the two boys, one was 17, one was 19, we'd love to put the both of you away, but we'll settle for one, and if one signs a confession, we'll let the other one go. So since the older fella had done time, and he had a very bad and emotional experience at it, the younger fella signed up to save his brother from going back into Long Cash. And so that fella has been now in the Crumlin Road prison since January of 1980, and he has yet to be charged. He has yet to be brought before a court. And I got a letter just the other day from his brother, who has since went back to Ireland, to Belfast, and his case will come up in the court hopefully this June. If it's not this June, then the court closes down for the summer. His case will not be heard till September, October at the earliest, which means that he will be 2 years almost in the Crumlin Road prison, has never been charged, and has never seen the court. And this is typical of what goes on over there.
Mrs. Gallagher?
I couldn't agree more with the caller. That is exactly the situation in Crumlin Road. The situation that we have there now is that it is not people awaiting trial. What we have, in fact, in Crumlin Road Jail now is internment by remand.
And if I may add, Mrs. Gallagher, I did go to the prison to make the visit, and this was arranged before I left the United States. I got to the prison. I showed my driver's license, which has my picture on it. I was admitted to the prison. I was searched. I went into the waiting room. I got on the line to go over to the cell block, and a fella came out, and he gave me some two excuses, which were foolishness, as to why I could not make the visit. And I pointed out to him that how ridiculous what he was saying to me, and the sum total was that because I was an American going into the prison, they didn't want me there. They gave me the bum's rush out the door. And this was my experience in dealing with this one case that I just related to you. And it's a tragedy. This poor fella, 19 years of age, in there now for a year and a half, and in the letter I just got, his brother stated that they have 10 charges against this fellow going back to 1975, which means that he was 14 years old when he committed the so-called first charge that they have against him. Thank you very much.
I'm glad that you told this story. I thank you. By the way, on Sunday night, the second part of our program will have to do with crime victims, and we'll have the advocate from New Jersey of crime victims, and I think that we'll be able to bring some very important information to you. That's the second part of our program on Sunday night. The first part will have to do with fat people and whether or not you feel that it's healthy and it's fun to be fat. Please be sure to listen. You're on WMCA. Hello. Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
I'd like to speak to Paul O'Dwyer, please.
He's right here.
Go ahead. Yes.
Well, the first thing, the man that talked about the guns to Ireland, Paul is a lawyer, a distinguished lawyer. He's not about to violate the laws of the United States. He never did and he never will. The questions I have for him are these, very simple. I can't understand why the American hierarchy, they squawk about everybody in the world. They never say a thing about the people in Ireland, and believe me, we're their best friends. The second thing is we're always referred to as terrorists. Everybody else is a freedom fighter, and Paul knows exactly who I am. I'm an Irish St. Gregory, and I'm a former judge in Jersey City. I know my way around. I just can't understand what in the name of Almighty God, Paul, or anybody else can do to convince the American government that we're entitled to some representation.
And Jerry, with your record in the United States Army, if you can't do it in Jersey City, I can't do it anywhere.
I think one point that a previous caller raised, and this caller is also coming to, what can be done in the United States. Paul mentioned one thing, and Paul Abel mentioned another, and that is where is human rights going to? It's out onto the streets. And tomorrow at 12:30 outside Manhattan Correctional Center, there is a demonstration in support of Desi Mackin and his right to be treated as a political prisoner and not to be extradited back to Northern Ireland. That is one way of showing it.
I'm glad that you brought that out. I want to thank Reverend Paul Abel's father, Don Kenna, Richard Harvey, Paul O'Dwyer, and Catherine Gallagher. Good luck in your trip in America. I'm Candy Jones, and I thank all of you for being with us. This is WMCA, Strauss Communications in New York. Barry Farber coming up right after the news from the AP Radio Network. Good night.
The space shuttle is grounded. Specialists are trying to find a snag in a computer program that halted the final countdown to liftoff. At the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Terry White, the voice of Mission Control, says high-level officials will discuss the problem Saturday and make a decision.
NASA mission management team composed of top shuttle program managers at Johnson and Kennedy Space Centers will meet Saturday midday in a telephone conference to review the computer software problem which scrubbed Friday's launch attempt. At this time, there have been no firm decisions on fixes to be made in Columbia's general-purpose computer software. A go, no-go decision would have to be made by midday Saturday on a software fix in order to make a Sunday morning launch.
The time for launch Sunday morning is the same it was for Friday morning, 6:50 a.m. Eastern Time, but NASA has set no firm date. Astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen crawled out of the shuttle's cockpit Friday morning, bitter disappointment engraved on their faces. The United Mine Workers announced tonight that negotiations with the soft coal industry will resume Tuesday. But so far, the coal industry has no comment on that statement. Coal miners have been on strike since March 27th when their old contract expired. Philadelphia transit workers overwhelmingly approved a tentative contract Friday. It's been a week since they ended a 19-day strike that halted bus, trolley, and subway service for 400,000 daily commuters. The settlement includes a 14.5% pay increase over 2 years. This is Mark Weaver in Washington. Saying it's suffering from galloping double-digit inflation, American Telephone and Telegraph is seeking to raise long-distance rates. AT&T spokesman Pick Wagner says they asked the FCC for permission to hike rates 16%, but he says that's still below the pace of inflation.
In the period since the first quarter of 1976, the consumer price index has gone up 53%. In that same period, long-distance interstate telephone rates have only gone up 5%. So even with the increase that we have filed, telephone rates are still way below the increases which have occurred in other products and services.
Pick Wagner of AT&T. It's also getting more expensive to get an FHA loan. Federal officials say the ceiling on interest rates for FHA home loans will be raised to a record 14.5% next Monday. It'll make mortgage loans more costly for low and middle-income families, but the government says it's necessary to make sure loans will be available to those families. Mount St. Helens erupted Friday with a plume of light steam and ash that rose to over 15,000 feet. U.S. Geological Survey geologist Susan Robinson says seismic vibrations continued beneath the mountain.
There has been a continual tremor on the seismograph, and it's been marked by occasional large seismic bursts, which probably reflect increased steam emission and shallow earthquakes, possibly even some avalanching. This normal things that kind of go on, but at a much larger scale than we've seen in the past few weeks.
Light ash from the eruption fell near Spirit Lake, which was devastated by the volcano's explosive eruption last May. Some also fell in the town of Randall, Washington, about 30 miles north of the mountain. The 23rd victim in a string of murders in Atlanta was strangled to death. An autopsy in the body of 20-year-old Larry Rogers, a black man, was conducted in Atlanta Friday, and that's what they came up with. This is the Associated Press Radio Network. An avowed racist convicted of violating the civil rights of two black men who were shot to death is facing new charges. John Paul Franklin will be arraigned in Salt Lake City next week on first-degree murder charges in the killings. The men were shot down while jogging with two white women. It's apparently back to jail for Bernard Welch. Matthew Hoff reports that Welch was found guilty in the slaying of a famous doctor.
After escaping from a New York prison in 1974, Bernard Welch ran from police for 6 years, reportedly committing hundreds of burglaries in and around the nation's capital. U.S. attorneys say last December 5th, Welch was burglarizing the Halberstam house when the doctor and his wife came home. Halberstam was shot twice, and while driving himself to the hospital, saw Welch and ran him down with his car. Halberstam's wife, Elliot Jones Halberstam, later identified Welch as the gunman. After the verdict was read at the trial, Mrs. Halberstam asked friends to help her promote stiffer gun controls. Welch faces a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Matthew Hoff, Washington.
A man who claims he was knocked down by actor James Garner has filed a $1.2 million lawsuit against him. William Stewart alleges the incident, which supposedly took place during the 1981 Bing Crosby golf tournament at Pebble Beach, California, was humiliating. The suit claims the knockdown was widely publicized because it was recorded by television cameras and photographers. Garner's agent has not seen the suit. That's the news. From the Associated Press, Radio Network, I'm Mark Weaver.
Hi, lovely people. This is Ellen greeting you from Ellen's Cafe, opposite City Hall, right across the street from the mayor's office. How am I doing? Ellen's Cafe at 270 Broadway is open for breakfast, lunch, cocktails.
Political problem, then we have been since